Hi, I'm Alicia Kennedy, a writer, author, and publisher of From the Desk of Alicia Kennedy, a twice weekly newsletter on food culture, politics, and media. I also have a monthly salon series with different authors, essayists, editors, etc., anyone doing culture work, where we discuss research and writing and process and money, which is also really important. So today I'm publishing the first conversation that I had in this series with Dr. Sulan Masing about her book, Chinese and Any Other Asian, exploring East and Southeast Asian identity in Britain. This will be out in the US in September. It's already out in the UK. We had a really sprawling conversation about all the things that concern a food and culture writer these days. And again, yes, most candidly about money. The transcript of this conversation is available at my newsletter, aliciakennedy.news. And here is the conversation. I wanted to start off by just having you tell us a bit about your process for writing the book, how this book came to be, what people can expect from it.
Cool. Wow. Thank you so much. This is super exciting. And it's like Sunday evening in London. So it feels like just this lovely, cozy thing to be doing. And I guess this is really my first chat about my books. So that's also super nice. Um, so the book came about actually commissioning editor, so the kind of senior or head or whatever. I don't know how it works in terms of hierarchies. But yeah, the commissioning editor at my publishers got in touch with my agent and said, would Anna be interested in writing a book about East and Southeast Asian experience and identity in Britain, in the UK? Which was super. And I was like, absolutely, yes, I've been thinking about this for so long, and this is 100%. And that was really interesting because obviously so much of my work, my public work, was about food and drink, that I hadn't realized that my previous academic work and other sort of like low profile stuff was about a broader sort of concepts of identity and migration. And so for me, it was firstly really nice to know that people had understood that was understood in the sort of wider world. I wasn't just sort of food and drink. And so she asked me to pitch and put together a proposal, and she would take it to the sales and marketing team and all the other people involved. And yeah, and they loved it, and particularly really liked my title. That was kind of a key thing. I think, like with publishing, a lot of times it is the sort of sales and marketing teams that decide whether a book is worthwhile and feasible. And so having a good title helps. And yeah, they love the title, which was great. I mean, it was, for me, it was sort of a working title, and so it's Chinese and Any Other Asian, which is the tick boxes and the senses that people of East and Southeast Asian heritage can tick. So yeah, so that was it. And it took a while, like a bit of backwards and forwards, putting the pitch together actually to work out what it would look like. I wanted something that was had a lot more input in other people's voices. And I didn't want it to be an anthology, absolutely did not, but I really didn't want it to be a memoir because I felt really uncomfortable about writing about myself. But they were not keen on that at all. I wanted to have like sections which were written by other people, and they said no, just like weave it in instead. Anyway, so that was fine. But I just felt so strongly that it needed to make sure that there was such a strong presence of other people's voices. Um, and yeah, so that was, but because we'd had that discussion, that ended up being quite sort of key to in the editing process and that, so that was good. And then, yeah, so then I basically researched it for about a year, which was doing a lot of interviews, a lot of, at the British Library, trying to track down some information, some references and things like that, follow up lots of different leads. A lot of people didn't get back to me as well. A lot of organizations, it's like super small grassroots organizations. You sort of have to dig around for contact details and you can't find. And so it was really a lot of kind of puzzling, which, and a lot of leads going to dead ends and things like that, which can be really frustrating. Because part of my pitch was to put together a structure, and I was like so clear on the structure of how it would work, and I had kind of ideas of little leads of these situations. And I would say 50% of what I'd put in that pitch just couldn't happen. I couldn't get the research to really back it up, or it was like a line in a book which I thought was really interesting and important that led nowhere past that line and reference point. So that was really difficult. And then I basically wrote the first draft in 6 weeks, which was kind of insane, but it was also, I don't have any other financial backing. I couldn't take any time off work. I couldn't, and as a freelance journalist, like 50% of your time is just like pitching and coming up with stories and not making any money. And that's already 50% of my time that I needed to be on the book at least. So it was such a battle. And so in the end, I tried to get a part-time job and no one would hire me. I think I sent my CV out to like 100 different places and didn't even get an interview. And I was just like, I will do anything for a part-time job, and no one would hire me. I was like, oh, anyway, that's another story, but it was like really depressing. So I ended up going back waitressing. Because then that at least I knew I could do, and in hindsight, it was a really good thing because it got me out of the house, it got me talking to people, and it was a bit of a break, and I got to be part of a team. And so much of what I was researching was also very upsetting and depressing and quite isolating. So it was nice to have that break, sort of 3 days a week. But yeah, so I basically took 6 weeks off where I didn't write any articles, didn't pitch for anything, and only worked, I think, 2 days a week at the restaurant. And that was like, I could afford to do that for 6 weeks, and that was it.
Yeah.
And so I basically kind of vomited everything I thought about onto the page and put it into the structure that got approved in the pitch. And like also, so much of this research I researched for a year, but of course, so much of it was stuff that I've been reading and thinking about and experiencing and listening to people for like my whole life. Like it feels like this book was my entire life on a page, backed up with some kind of stats and other people saying similar things to me. So yeah, I really like vomited it out. And at the end of 6 weeks, I was like, I don't like this book. But I don't have anything else. I can't do anything else but submit it.
Yeah.
And it was a month late because my father died in that period. And so they were like, okay, that's fine, we can push it back. But it's only, well, yeah, it was like 3 months late, but I'd already agreed a 2 months extension or something like that. Anyway, so it wasn't, like being late on a deadline is something that no one tells you is kind of okay in publishing. So I was having an absolute fucking meltdown about it. And they were like, look, your dad died. There's lots going on. I understand this is difficult. And I had also said, like, I can't write this because I don't, I need to work and things like that. So it was actually, it was okay. But yeah, I had to submit it. And so, and there were parts of it that I really liked, but as a whole, I just didn't like it. So when I submitted, I said, look, these are the things that I think work. I'm really unsure about everything, lots of these other bits and pieces, etc., etc. And then the editors took like 4 months to get back to me. Like it's sort of, with publishing, I don't know how you feel, but it's almost a bit like you need it now, and wait.
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird, and I think that's across the board. And they're also juggling lots of bits and pieces, and they obviously have to set deadlines, whatever, a year, 18 months earlier, so they don't know what's going on in their lives either. So I get it, but it's distressing as an author. Yeah, so it was kind of, and the response that came back was, the structure does not work. And I think I felt really relieved when they said that, because that was what I was feeling. But because we had agreed on the structure and everyone was like on board with the structure, I thought I was failing by not making it work in the structure. So I was like super relieved. And I also knew that I'd written over word count on the basis that I generally tend to kind of write over word count with the idea that I would cut 50%, then add sort of 20%. That's generally how I work in articles in lots of different ways anyway. I like editing. I like being brutal. I like ripping things out and starting again.
Yeah.
So yeah, so then I came back and had a meeting with my editor went on maternity leave and had another editor, but both were there together, and I printed out my whole book, chopped it all up and laid it, moved it around and laid it across the like the meeting room and on the floor of the meeting room with my editors, and kind of was like, okay, on your feedback, this is how I think it then should go. And so we all agreed on that. And then again, I had like another 6 weeks where I could have, that was all I could do to sort of rewrite it. And so I did that and kind of like wrote under my word count by quite a bit. And my editor came back and said, structure definitely works, but now you've just ripped out any kind of personality. She was like, you're really engaging in person, Anna. You know, you can be quite funny, and like, this is really dry. So then I had to layer in like personality and anecdotes and stuff, and they really pushed me to be more personal, which I felt so uncomfortable at. And they, you know, and really pushed for me to, you know, be quite tough on various institutions. And like, my editor at one point was like, not that I want you crying in the British Library, but also I kind of want you crying in the British Library. Like, and she's really lovely. She's also mixed race. So, you know, she kind of understands all these tensions, but equally like racism and trauma sort of, it's a story point, you know? And it's so that was a bit that was really hard for me, is how do you balance that out of like having an engaging story without like doing trauma porn?
Yeah.
So that was the juggle and the difficulty. But yeah, I think but they were also incredibly like apologetic, and also like, oh, you've dealt with this like feedback really well. Which I found really weird, because like, I don't think you can write well until you've written something terrible that has an audience, you know, like you
Yeah.
need an audience to respond to something.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So like, I think you should write a terrible first draft. Like, yeah, I don't know, like when I did my PhD, and I had done really like all the previous pieces of writing I'd done for my PhD had all these great reviews and remarks, and it would get passed around the humanities and blah blah blah. And then my first draft of my thesis was bad, and my supervisors were kind of like, I don't know what's happened, like what is this, you know? And then we sat down again and talked about structure. In the end, like, I rewrote my PhD thesis 5 times, and it took 18 months. And after from the second draft until the 5th draft, it was all the same words, but just in different orders and sort of tweaked and stuff. So like, you get really, really bored of your work. But like, I think it has to be that conversation between editors. Like, you know, writing is a performance and is a conversation between your audience, right? Your readers and things like that. And you don't get to have that conversation a lot. So your editor is your audience, and you have to trust them. And so I found it weird, and I don't know whether that's because most people in the world of writing have the ability to spew out a draft and then have another 6 weeks to refine it, and so what they're delivering is something much more refined, like I guess, but like, I don't have that liberty. But also, I don't know if I don't know, I think I want to have much more. I think it's better if it gets responded and ripped apart and talked over and discussed and, you know, put back together.